So welcome everybody. So in this meeting we have me, Daniel Valadas, John Cornelissen, Barry Walusko, Andrew Offling, Joe Craig, Peter Dunker, and Clint Patterson. If anybody else has joined in and I don't notice, please let me know so I can add you. In our last meeting, I've saved the minutes. If there's anything there that I didn't note properly, just let me know. But basically, we solved for the naming conventions on GitHub community modules. We now have a tag DNN core module for all the ones that are the old core modules to differentiate them from other modules that are part of the DNN community repository or organization. We also kind of agreed on copyright, that what was there was okay until otherwise noted. We don't have anything to do about this. All licenses are currently MIT, and if we notice something that is not, it needs to be. We also agreed that there was no contributor license agreement necessary, and we polled in Slack for whoever wanted to be maintainers of specific modules. So on the modules where we have a specific maintainer, let's suppose the events module, we have agreed to note the maintainer in the README, and before merging anything that would be a change, you know, small bug fix would be okay, but anything that would be a change, to request that person as to validate the change before merging it. There's a couple things here that we're going to finish on this meeting regarding forums and Active Directory. And that was pretty much it from our last meeting. So if anything was noted wrong there, let me know and we'll adjust it. For today's meeting, what we have on the agenda, what's finished, we have legal, maintainers, merge and release process, and the repository module. On things that we need to finish would be Active Directory and forums, and new things to discuss would be how do we manage branches? Do we want a single branch or two branches? There's different opinions on this, so we should agree on something. I would like to discuss having a standard document for contributing to the community modules to help newcomers and old people to be able to contribute in a standard fashion. We need to discuss also some modules that we might not want to revive, but instead provide an alternative module. One of these would be the maps module. And I would like to discuss also if we want some kind of roadmap, how we gonna name our versions, and that affects database scripts as well. And Andrew would have to, if he prepared for that, show us a little bit about AppVeyor and if it's something that we could integrate with the core modules. Is there anything else you would like to add in today's agenda?
This is John. One thing you might look at is, since there's not going to be any more core modules, is whether any significant module that comes along and wants to be considered a core module, do we accept them or what?
Well, one thing that we discussed in our last meeting was the naming core modules references modules that used to come with DNN. So sure. If there's any other community module that's nice and everything, it could get into that organization, no problem at all. But we would not call it a core module. What we decided as a name was that the core module was a module that used to come with DNN.
Sure, okay.
Sounds right. Okay, so in the finished businesses, well, we just talked about legal, maintainers, that's resolved. Merge and release process kind of relates to maintainers, so Any module that has a specific maintainer better synchronize with that person before merging important changes that would affect the module direction. In the news announcements, the repository module is now DNN 9.2 compatible. There's still a couple small issues that need to be solved, but at least it upgrades fine. And I'm working this week on the gallery module. Just to bring it DNN 9.2 compatible first. It still won't be nicer looking than it was, but at least it's going to be, people going to be able to upgrade. So that should be done in maybe a day or two or this weekend. In the unfinished businesses, we have Barry. From the last meeting, we talked about recommending an alternative module for replacing the Active Directory core module. I know like a couple hours ago, are you still with us? Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. I know you published a pull request to document upgrading from the core module to the Glanton Active Directory Pro module. Now, my understanding was that there would be some basic free edition, and then people could, from that, upgrade to a commercial edition. Is that the case, or did I not understand correctly?
For now, we don't have any free edition, but I was talking with Ian Sampson. He's the CEO of the Glanton company, and we want to create a free Active Directory plugin, but not open source. That's the official stand of the Glanton company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because from a DNN perspective, I checked in today because I know that pull request got refused, and that person who refused it is not in this meeting. Now, I wanted to check a little bit on the opinion from DNN, and it would not be acceptable to recommend a commercial module because it would favor a specific vendor. So I'm in talks to see what would be acceptable. If we provide a free one that is not open source, is that acceptable? If we provide a free one that's open source, that's basic, and then you can from there upgrade to something commercial. So before you invest too much time in that, if the goal was to advertise it in the core module text, that we settle this decision first.
Okay. I think it will take for us about a month to create a free plugin. Yeah, and then I will create a separate migration document to this free plugin.
Okay, so you are on the Slack group too?
No, I'm not on the Slack.
Okay, I'll send you an invite so we can discuss that outside of the meeting.
Okay.
Just to make sure we don't get any other, and that's one example, but it could happen on other modules too, that no one wants to revive it. There's an alternative, but it's commercial. If there's different vendors that offer the same thing, we couldn't, recommend one vendor in particular to a commercial solution. So I'm gonna have to discuss this a little. Regarding forums and active forums, so for those who don't know, DNN had a core module called Forums, which was free. At some point, they acquired active modules, which included active forums module, and they released that module to the community free and open source. and it's not currently maintained by the DNN community. It's a separate project. I know there was an upgrade path regarding that, and I cannot find that document anymore. I found one link, but the link was dead. I contacted Active Forums on their GitHub repository. I created an issue about this, and I also contacted them on their website contact form, and I still did not get an answer. That was about a week ago. Does anybody know personally people involved in the Active Forums? No. So I gonna mark this as
Daniel.
Yes.
This is Clint. I'm driving. I don't know if you got a lot of feedback, but I mean, I do personally know the original creator of Active Forums, which is Will Morganwick, and I mean, there's probably people on here on the call that know him as well. I'm not sure who is listed on the maintainer list for that project on GitHub, but I mean, I'm happy to reach out to Will if there's a question or something.
Okay, if you can, I don't know, get us in touch or discuss with.
I mean, is Will listed as the, I guess, project owner or maintainer or whatever?
I have Jason Brunkens, which owns the repository. And then there's a lot of contributors, some names that we know, like Mitchell Sellers and Sebastian and Peter Dunker, that contributed, Chris Hammond. But I don't know who actually, maintains the website, is responsible for the whole repository.
Okay, so Jason Brunken was a DNN MVP, and he, championed that project for a while, but then I don't know if he took a new job or something. His responsibilities kind of changed, and he has since, not been as active with that project. And I think he, was outwardly vocal with that, saying that he wasn't going to be able to spend as much time on it as, at least the leader. So I'll reach out to Will and see if, if he knows who's the owner, or at least who gets contact forms from that website, or I can, put him in touch with you via email.
Okay, awesome. So we'll not be able to resolve this on this meeting, but if you can.
Yeah, I think you've got to entertain the possibility that we cannot find anyone still active in DNN who has active knowledge of that module. And then the next discussion comes like, okay, so how do we move forward when we have a module that has no one familiar with the code anymore, who is willing to assume the task of maintaining it?
Yeah, the thing is that there was a recent release that makes it work in 9.2. So the module is actually currently working.
Okay, so someone is working on it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's recent commits and, relatively recent in May, which is not bad. And I think my idea would be to, if nobody is actively maintaining it now, to move it under DNN community as a replacement for the old forums module.
Mm-hmm.
If we have more people interested in that.
My guess is that somebody has a client that is using it and they don't want to own it, but they needed to make it work, so they probably updated it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably right.
So, okay, so anyway, that's not something we can solve now and then, but we can keep trying. In the new subjects, what's your view on branches? There's one school of thought where we should have a master and development branch and merge individual pull requests and commits into development. And when it's ready for release, to merge that into master and tag the release number on master. Another school of thought is, since we have tags, we wouldn't need to have two branches. We could do everything on a single branch. Is there any pros and cons from going one branch, two branches? Any opinions?
I think it also depends a little bit on the complexity of the module. So for some of the work that I do, for most of the work that I do, tends to be so devoid of complexity that a single branch is actually just fine. But I think if you get into something like the forms module, where you might want to test out and keep, because I think it only serves a purpose to have a development branch if you need to be able to release a quick patch of your current master, right? You're behind the scenes, you're working on this new release, and all of a sudden someone comes along and says, oh, by the way, there's a security hole here or there. And at that point, you go, okay, let's roll back to our last release in the master, make the quick bug fix, re-release. I think that is where it's useful, right?
Yes, but I don't know if it's needed because we can branch from a tag even if we have a single branch.
Right.
So let's say let's say we have a single branch. There's a tag version 100, and we start working on version 120. If we want to make a 111, we can go back to 110 and branch from there. Or am I wrong?
Andrew has an opinion about this as well.
Yeah, so what I usually do is I'll have a master branch, and that's kind of what DNN currently uses as a development branch. And master branch is where all the latest code check-ins go in. And if I'm working on any type of feature, I'll create a feature branch. When I'm done with that, I'll pull request and merge that into master. And then when I make a release, I'll either tag that commit or I'll create a release branch. The tag or release branch both have their pros and cons, but with the size of all these modules, I think having just one master branch, and if a maintainer, let's say, wants to do features, just create a feature branch, and when you're done with it, merge it back in.
Okay, so we would have one master branch, no development, and if we're working on a long-term feature, we branch from master. Would that be?
Yeah, so maybe not long. Like I do it depends on how long or how much work the maintainer wants to do. Or for me, if I'm even working on a small bug, I like to create a branch for that, work on the bug, work on the feature, whatever, no matter how big it is, and then check the code in by pull request or merging it in. That way I'm never really committing directly to master, and it kind of just protects the branch a little bit.
Okay, and since we don't have all the maintainers on this meeting to agree as a group for everybody, should we just not touch that and leave it as is? If a maintainer wants to do it as some way, he can decide for his own repository.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Anybody disagrees with that?
No, I think that's a good idea. Maybe have a guideline, but not say it's not required. Like if you don't know, if you don't have any ideas, here's an idea. But other than that, you can do it how you want.
Okay, so we should leave as is, but if a maintainer wants some workflow, document it properly.
Well, I think the guiding principle just now was quite important, actually, and I think it goes for more than just this, which is we provide guidance, but we don't enforce rules.
Yeah. Okay, but in any case, someone who would be providing a pull request should do that on the default branch, whatever that one is.
Yeah, but again, ultimately it's up to the maintainer to decide how he wants to manage the project.
Yeah, but
Daniel, could you ask that the maintainer state in the README, how they're going about doing that? Because I'm thinking about it from a newbie's perspective. Like, let's say you got somebody who's trying to learn, you know, about GitHub, about development, and they go to multiple projects and they end up confused. So, you know, the maintainer can still do what they want, but just in some way communicate that so people are aware.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant by documented, but I added here in the README MD file.
So what we could do to solve that problem, and this wouldn't be a guideline, I think it should be required, is every core module should have a contributing guide. So that would kind of state, if you want to contribute, this is how you do it. You need to create, you know, a pull request on the master branch or the development branch or whatever.
Yeah, which is actually the next subject. Makes a lot of sense. It should be in the contributing MD file, where and how to publish a pull request. That makes sense. So that kind of solves the other issue. I just want to go back a little bit because I see in the text comments a couple questions still about forums, active forums. Forums was a core module. It used to be bundled with DNN. It was DNN forums. And a long time ago, it stopped being maintained because Active Forums was now free and open source and given to the community. So Active Forums was never distributed with DNN, but it was a logical continuation of forums. And when that happened, there was a migration document, which is what we're looking for right now. Because if we find that document, we can just put it in the forums repository and send people to migrate to active forums, and then we would be maintaining active forums instead of forums. Does that make it clear for everybody that I think so. Just looking a little bit at the text messages here. Okay, so contributing MD exists on a lot of repositories, which is a guideline on how to clone the repository, build it, and submit a pull request. I was making a video about this the other day, and I kind of stopped it because I wanted us to agree on those branches and stuff like this, so I don't suppose too much stuff in the video. And then we would need to also make that a text version of the how to contribute. Now, in general, the modules I have touched, I've used MS-Build with a build script that will end NuGet packages. So it would automatically pull the dependencies from NuGet, build and publish an install zip, and the debug zip, which would include the debug DLLs and symbols file, which we may call symbols zip. Does that seem a good naming, or debug zip? Now, some modules may not use MS-Build for the packaging. Is that the case? Like Yarn or Gulp or stuff like this?
Well, funny you say it because I'm working on it today, but those usually work, I mean, they use MS-Build, but they use MS-Build under the covers, right? So you have a task runner like Gulp, and that takes the result of MS-Build and then creates the package. I think what I'm running into anyway is that the MS-Build community tasks, there are DNN community tasks, right, to create packages.
Mm-hmm.
But of course they are very opinionated, because you know how you create packages is a very opinionated subject. But we can certainly provide guidance on, okay, so this is how you would do it in a noob kind of manner, and use the default DNN ones.
Okay, so for modules who would use something like this, it would not work directly in vanilla installation of Visual Studio. They would need to install Node.
No, with MS-Build, it's just a NuGet package that you install, So that should be actually quite transparent for anyone. So that should run when you clone the repo and you try to build. That should run, right? If you include the build script and the build DLL, because they can sit in the project folder. If you include that in the in source control on GitHub,
okay,
then someone should be able to just hit, go release and build, and then it should create a package.
Even without having Node installed?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Node is only required for things like gulp.
Okay, but there could be modules that build using gulp, right?
Yeah, but I would
or in the
advise
future?
Against it for core modules because it creates extra dependencies. I know I do it for some of my modules, so I will need to change that. I used Nant for a long time, by the way, which it has a similar drawback. Like you need all the extra bits and pieces that come with it. MS Build is the only thing that just comes in Visual Studio, and that's it.
Okay, but if we think a little bit in the future and there's modules that require something like this, for instance, if it's going to be a React UI, that's not possible with one click.
Yes and no. Yeah. The MS Build takes care of the C# code, indeed, like you're hinting at, and it could call into other stuff, but you don't want to create that extra dependency. I usually keep it separate. I have my Webpack tasks to make sure that when I'm developing, I'm continuously building the scripts. So that's all the client UI stuff. But once I'm building the module, it's totally independent of that. That just takes the resulting, the last build of that JavaScript and packs it in.
But if you need to change something in the UI, then you need Node.
Yeah, and the UI, you're probably, the chances are that you're going to need Node. Okay,
so for most of them, you can do it directly one click, but if you need something else, we should document how to set up for that in the contributing MD too.
Yeah, I think that's fair, yeah. But I think that's up to the maintainer in a sense to say, okay,
yes.
Well, if you're going to need to build it this or that way.
So do we have a preference on when is the appropriate time to use Node versus when is not an appropriate time to use Node? For example, if I know we don't have any of the core modules like this, but if I did have a core module that was MVC based, let's say, there's really no reason to have Node or Gulp there as part of the build infrastructure. That, in my opinion, that would be adding an unnecessary dependency. But if you're doing like a SPA module that really requires Node for some of the front end libraries that the module is actually using, then I could see a need for Node. And is that something that we're trying to define with this? So is when would be an appropriate time to add those dependencies versus not?
Yeah, I think as much as possible we should have as few dependencies as needed for the thing to work. However, we also have to think in the future. So if we're going to move away from web forms, it's going to be either MVC or SPA. And if we go the MVC way, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an expert on either MVC or SPA, but I think there's a lot more React components available in the platform that we could use in the SPA module. So it would be quicker to develop UIs. But if we go MVC, we have only basic HTML controls right now. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, there's a, put it this way, the SPA module is so dumb that you're going to have to do stuff on client side with something like React or Angular or Vue or whatever other framework you're using. The MVC module pattern is a little bit more elaborate, so you can actually get away without any client-side scripts to make a module. But if you're like me, you still create client-side blurbs that do stuff on those pages just to make the user experience more friendly. So there's no direct connection. There's no like, oh, if you're building Spot, then you're going to need Node, or if you're doing MVC, then you're going to need Node. It's just that it's inconceivable that you're a developer, in my opinion, and even already today, and you don't have Node.js already installed in your dev machine. That to me seems really, really weird.
Yeah. Okay, but I still think we should at least document it, because there's kind of a separation of developers. There's the old guys who are very comfortable with web forms and are leaning now to learning modern client-side technologies. They're not comfortable setting up the development environment. And there's the other way around, the new developers, younger developers, they're very comfortable with that, and it seems obvious to them. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'd say that we can make a general contributing MD that would cover most of the modules, and then on a project-by-project basis, we can expand on that if there's specific requirements. That would not be a simple click and run.
Yeah.
Sounds right? Okay, so next subject, there is one in particular, which is the maps module, but in general, are there other modules that we just better not touch at all and just suggest an alternative? The maps is one of them, because even with the greatest effort, if we revive it, people could not be using it for a couple years because Google itself changed the Maps API. So that module could not be working for the past 3-4 years at all. So for sure, people already implemented something else. So I think this one could be abandoned. The DNN Connect maps, I think, moved to DNN Community.
No, not yet.
Not yet?
I was holding off until we had this discussion.
Okay.
And also because you're still chasing down, if I'm correct, whether this was actually even possible to use, even if you had an old DNN and if you could get it to work. I couldn't, but maybe someone else can.
No, I checked on the history of the Google Maps APIs, and I think in 2015 or something, the Google Maps API v2 was discontinued and would no longer work. So for sure, for at least 3 years, that module could not have been working, even on all the DNN websites.
Right. And the difficulty with, the only downside with replacing the old maps with the new maps module or with the Connect maps module is that the functionality is different. So the old maps module had was actually quite ambitious. It allowed you to create providers to look at data, and then it would, and you could even choose different kind of map providers as well. It was a very flexible conduit for graphical geographic information. Now, as the maintainer of this, I'm or at least the new owner of this field. My take on it is this: there are now, if you go to the store, there are like 4 maps modules out there already, right? Google Maps modules. So vendors have jumped into this hole already, if you like. So there are commercial options. In terms of free ones, I didn't do an extensive research there, but there's of course the one that I created 2 years ago to demonstrate the SPA module pattern. And that one is kind of languishing in the DNN Connect directory because, I'm not pushing this everywhere as the map solution. I'm just using it on a few sites that I needed a map on. It has a limited functionality compared to the last one because all it does is displays a map of a certain region. then you can specify a role for people that can, in the module permissions, you can say, okay, these people have permission to add points to the map. And all it does then is show those pointers on the map. But it was supposed to be, fairly simple. And I think the nice thing about it is actually it's so trivially easy to use, because if you just zoom the map out or in and you displace it, and then you can click, if you're an admin and in edit mode, you can click on a button and it basically sets the map at that point. There's no more having to do this. That's what you need to do in the old maps. You have to set, the zoom factor yourself. You have to specify the midpoint of the map and those kind of things. That's all done automatically for you. Certain things I think are more polished than the old maps module, but certainly it has less features. So now is the choice for the community, like, do we just merge those two projects and say, okay, we have one core map module that we move forward with, or not?
In my opinion, we should revive the old core module, replace the Google Maps API by whatever the new one is, and then rebuild the UI so it can reuse some parts of the DNN Connect's map UI.
All right, but that's not going to be, put it this way, that's not going to be me, because that's way too much work.
No, I think that's something we can do as a community, but it won't be tomorrow.
I wonder who will do that.
I can help on that. Right now, my number one priority is to get all the modules DNN 9.2 compatible. This one is impossible because of the Google Maps API. No matter if the module is beautiful or not, just to allow people to maintain their data. And
well, like you just said, no one has data anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. What I liked from the old one,
you just said that.
Yeah.
You just stated it couldn't be working for the past 3 years.
No,
so
it couldn't be working, but it could still be there, not visible.
I don't get it.
I don't think it's. I mean, you could disable your maps page or something, but still have the data in your database, the addresses.
All right, whatever.
Not impossible. I don't think there's as many. But anyway, what I liked about the old one was that you could do geolocation, so you could search for addresses instead of knowing where it is on the map.
Yeah.
And the fact that it had providers, if you have, I don't know, a store locator or something, you could display them on that map,
right,
which was kind of nice. Now, we're all working on this, voluntarily, and it's not something that would happen tomorrow. But in my opinion, it would be nice to merge both. So to take what's good from the old one and take what's good from the new one.
It's not going to happen. This is going to take too long. Is my opinion. That's going to take years. And I don't think you'll find someone, frankly, to take that over.
Yeah. So, I think we can leave it there, mark in the old maps module that it's no longer compatible due to the maps API changes and everything, so it's not currently maintained. But if we have volunteers in the future that want to attack that, it's there to work on. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. You can state on the page that it's effectively dead.
Okay. Okay.
And just in case, just to add to that, you might be pissing off some commercial vendors, of course, if you sink a whole bunch of time into this to recreate an awesome maps module.
Yeah.
because they jumped into the hole in the meantime.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, that's something to consider. We would have to see what happens, but I mean, we can blame an open source free module that's there from doing something regarding the commercial modules. I mean, we could say the same thing for all of the other ones.
No, that's not true. It's not all of the other ones had replacements because they didn't work. They had replacements because they were looking at other functionality. But if someone jumped in and basically redid that module, but then maintained it, then they would effectively be competed away. Now, that's all, I think, fair game. It's all. I don't think that should define our future for it. But yeah, something that could happen anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, let's leave it as is, and we'll see what happens with that. Regarding roadmaps and version numbers and database scripts, there was a question. There was a pull request that included the database script with the version number that was invented in that pull request because, well, we need a version to run the script. Do we want to go on each of the modules and create a milestone with the next version that we think about releasing so that people could use that version number in their pull requests? I've done it on a couple modules. Events, maybe. No, not events. What's...
Well, okay.
Are you talking about the versioning for the SQL provider scripts?
Yeah, well, kind of affects everything. So let's say the gallery module, the latest published release was 4.4.0. So let's say we have bugs in the list of issues. We start a milestone for 4.4.1, and we can assign all the bugs into that version and the new features in 4.5.0 or something like this. So we have them tagged here. So people submitting a pull request to fix this, if they need to add an SQL script, they could make it for 5.0.0. They know in advance what the release number is going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Okay, so people who maintain a specific module, they could create a release for, if they see there's bugs, they can increment just the last digit. If they see there's enhancements, they could increase the middle digit and have this available as a milestone. And if there's a massive change, such as moving from VB to C# or totally changing from web forms to MVC or SPA, we boost the first digit. Everybody agrees with that? It's kind of semantic versioning. Okay. And that would have to be done after publishing a release to create new milestones for whatever's going to come up next. Okay, awesome. There was talks about AppVeyor. Maybe, Andrew, you could fill us up on this subject. I know
Daniel?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Daniel, can you have a look in the chat window? Because I think I found the conversion script from forum to active forum.
Oh, you are awesome.
I'm not sure, but
Where did you put that?
in the chat window.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. I'm gonna minimize that, and I'm gonna run tests on this, and that could
I'm not
solve our
sure whether
problem.
this worked, but it has been created by Chris Hammond at some point in time when they DNN Corp acquired Active Forums. And
I
it's just
think
in the repository of Active Forums, but I'm not sure whether it's still current, but at least it's a starting point.
yes, because at least we know what goes where, and we have a good idea. So I'm gonna next week test that with forums and active forums. That is awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, regarding AppVeyor, so basically we could have automated builds to validate if a pull request breaks or not the build of the module. Is that right? I'm not very familiar with this, so
Yeah, do you want me to talk about this a little bit?
yeah, go ahead.
All right, yeah. So I was submitting some pull requests. I believe it was the Wiki Project, and one of the things I noticed is we don't have any type of continuous integration build set up for pull requests, and we just got that, or we're finishing that up for the main DNN platform project right now. And for a lot of the open source projects that I personally maintain, it's one of the first things I do is I like using AppVeyor for small projects. So I do a lot in the Xamarin space. And so when I create a component, the first thing I do is I'll set up an AppVeyor build for it to set up pushing stuff up to NuGet and just building it for pull requests. So I think this would be a really good avenue for us to pursue for all of the community core modules. Is when someone submits a pull request, it would then use AppVeyor to build it, and you could set that up really easy with a cake script. We could use other build agents, and the only reason why I'm recommending AppVeyor is it's free for any open source project. So as long as your project is hosted on GitHub, you can go and create a project for free, and they give you more than enough for the size of our projects. They give you more than enough build minutes where you don't have to worry about stuff. For the case of the DNN platform project, we ended up using VSTS because we got that for the .NET Foundation. I don't think we would be able to use that for these in particular. So what I was thinking I could do is I could show the group here how I have some of my AppVeyor and GitHub projects set up. And
do you want to show us your screen?
Yeah, let me share screen. It says I can't share.
Yeah, hold on. I have to enable. I think I have to stop my share. Stop share, and then you can share it. I think.
All right. Oh, we can share all sorts of things. I'll show the desktop.
Awesome.
All right. Can you guys see the GitHub window up here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is for a Xamarin component. I know it's not DNN, but the concept still remains the same. So when you come to the GitHub page, one of the first things I put up there is I put build status, and that's very popular among a lot of GitHub projects. And if you see down on the bottom, it's already linking to AppVeyor there. I can also publish stuff automatically out to NuGet. It doesn't really matter for this, but the big thing is having a nice little green badge here that says build passing. If I click that, it brings me over to AppVeyor, and it has the build information for that build, any artifacts that go along with that. So in this case, it's artifacting a NuGet package file. In our case, we would have our installer files, so our zip files for the installer, and the source would be the two ones that it would produce as an artifact. And
so we could have our install package and our debug DLL that came from the
exactly
script. That works, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
So here's the game. I'm writing a pull request. I write my pull request. I submit it. This build kicks off automatically. It's part of our validation check. If it fails, well, you got to fix your stuff before we can even look at it. But it passes. Well, now anyone in the community that has interest in that pull request can come here, download the artifact, and try installing it on their DNN website and see if it works.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I could So, and there's a couple different ways to go about this. I personally like using cake scripts with app there, and cake scripts is just an overglorified PowerShell script, when it's the framework that we're using and part of the new DNN build infrastructure, and it's just C# based build tasks, which are pretty straightforward and simple. So let me show you what those look like. We don't necessarily need to do cake scripts for it, but it's something that I like doing. And this is just an example of what a cake script looks like. It's just, we write our build in C#, and I like doing it for this scenario because I can run the PowerShell script locally. It's going to do the exact same thing the build's going to do, and we can move between different build environments if we don't like it.
And
this is kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, go ahead.
That would be parallel to a local build. It would not break a local build.
Correct. Correct. And the only difference is if so Cake has extensions to run like gulp builds we were talking about using Node earlier versus MS Build. The only difference between doing this and going to Individual Studio and actually building your project would be if one of those two things do something differently. But when you configure your Cake script, one of the things that I always do is I want it to run the same build that's going to be running in Visual Studio. So that's a way to make sure those things stay consistent. If you're running gulp, obviously this script would need to have the gulp commands in it as well.
Okay, sounds good to me.
This is the way I like doing stuff with open source projects, and then you just set it up to automatically build pull requests, and when they come in, it'll be one of the checks.
That sounds good to me. It's not something I would feel comfortable writing, but if you submit pull requests on that and it works, it's awesome. Anybody has comments on that?
One question: you do need because we depend on DNN. You need the .NET Nuke NuGet packages, I guess, named as
correct,
packages, right? And they don't go back before 9.1, I believe.
The .NET Nuke bundle starts at 9.1, but the individual libraries, they are available.
I believe I was able to get the version 8 on one of the pull requests I was working on for the Wiki project.
Okay.
So, some of them go as far as version 6.
But usually they, because the let's see, there's some dependencies there on Microsoft System Web or the System Web MVC, I believe.
But you don't need to do this for all the builds, though. Like if there's a problem where we can't use NuGet, we'll just create a lib folder and reference it that. That's not dependent on what we're talking about.
Okay. It's not that you're forced down a NuGet path. Okay. Yeah.
This is just so looking at this build script that we have in front of us here. Line 7, there's a task. Line 16, there's a task. Line 31, there's a task. And line 34, there's a task. These are different tasks that I defined for this build. If you can't use NuGet for whatever reason, don't use it.
Okay. Okay. No, that's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Cool.
Okay. So yeah, I think that would be welcome. I'm not comfortable making it, but if you can submit that, then
yeah. What I could do, since I'm familiar with the Wiki project, since I've been doing some pull requests there, is I could submit another pull request that would set this stuff up. The big question that I would have is
credentials.
Yeah. So when we come over here, you'll notice at the up at the top, it's linked directly to my personal GitHub. So since those projects are all on the DNN community, we would have to set the account up there. But again, AppVeyor's promise is any open source project in GitHub gets you free builds. So
okay,
we would just need to set it up with that account and link it to that repository.
I know Ernst is available right now only in chat, and I lost the chat window. Hold on, let me exit full screen.
Well, I can see you.
Ernst, are you available? Yeah. Do you know if that's something possible to do it under the DNN community credentials?
I'm not sure because I think Clint is the formal owner of the DNN community organization on GitHub. I'm not sure whether there is a credential directly related to that. It's all personal email addresses, I think.
And
But
Clint is
it's
with
just
us.
ask, yeah.
Yeah,
I would just for my
community
repository, I would just use my own app fair if there's one, my own credentials in there.
No. No.
But because it's open source projects, because the number of builds are very limited, if every repository for a core module has its own maintainer supplying their credentials, I don't think that would be a problem.
So I can take a look at this in a little bit more detail because I haven't done it within organization before on GitHub. So I could take a look at it, and if I run into problems, should I reach out to Clint then? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. But you have to
Okay.
instruct him what to do.
Yeah, I am a GitHub guru. So you just tell me what you need, and I will snap my fingers and schedule a meeting, and we will make it happen.
All right, Clint, I need you to make all the pull requests.
Yeah. It would be, look, somebody asked who deleted some branch on GitHub today, and I was like, oh God, did I do something?
Okay, awesome. So I think you guys can work together on getting this on one project, and as soon as it works good, we can do that on multiple.
Yeah, I'll do it for the Wiki project, and I'll get together with Clint if I need him.
Awesome.
So the Wiki project will become the sample, the example how things can be done.
That's going to be done on the Wiki, right? Project.
Okay.
Or at least
How
for
do I
build
get
stuff.
back my screen now? I think you need to stop sharing yours. And then I can share again mine.
If you're host, you should be able to override him, Daniel.
Yeah, maybe. So, okay, so for this, I'm gonna add Andrew will do it on Wiki as a first example. Then he can submit that on other modules too.
So what I'll do with this is I'll get together pretty much some boilerplate code that we can use on the other modules. And obviously, like Peter was saying, some modules we can't use NuGet for the DNN dependencies, so we could modify it slightly. But we should be able to have a boilerplate that we could just use on most of the projects with minor changes.
Yeah, one instance of that is the module I'm working now, the gallery module. It has a DLL in there that we don't have the source code for, which was a library that came with the gallery, and it needs to be in the bin folder in order to build the rest of the module. So that would be one case where we need to include it in GitHub.
Do we have to recreate the gallery exif DLL file?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a decompiler?
Yeah, that's something we could do. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that covers pretty much what we had in the agenda. Anything we want to add at this stage? No. So I'm gonna stop recording now. Thanks everybody for coming.